Today, I'm presenting on Chapter 105, General Permits and Limiting Conditions. Just as a general statement, the presentation today does assume some level of familiarity with Chapter 105 regulations and permitting from the audience. As an overview, I will talk briefly on dam safety, waterway management, what's regulated and why. I'll go over what I'm calling a Chapter 105 permit hierarchy, looking at whether or not you need a permit under dam safety, waterway management, and following a flow chart for which permit you need to apply for. Spend a little more time going over the Chapter 105 general permits, what they are, what are responsibilities, conservation districts versus DEP, basic components, and how to submit these. Spend the bulk of the time today talking about limiting conditions that we see time and time again with certain general permits that can prevent projects from qualifying for coverage under one of the general permits that's reviewed here at the Conservation District. And finally, we'll look at 105 frequently asked questions that we receive. So what does Chapter 105 regulate and why? This is just directly paraphrased, copied and pasted from the 105 regulations. Chapter 105 regulates obstructions and encroachments located in, along, across, or projecting into a watercourse, floodway, or body of water. I think within that, there's probably two other words that warrant a definition. Obstructions and encroachments, structures, activities that would change the course, the current, the cross section, expanding or diminishing of a watercourse, floodway, or body of water. So it covers not only encroachments, excavations, fill, near stream, other resources, also obstructions, actual structures, culverts, marinas, utilities, piers, wharfs, etc. The purpose of the regulations, it's regulation for the protection, safety, welfare, health, property of people, for natural resources, environmental rights, and to conserve and protect water quality. So with our two delegations, 105 is interesting. The 102 purpose is very much geared towards protect, maintain, reclaiming water quality. But 105 definitely has a stated regulatory purpose of safety, health, welfare of people, property, infrastructure. I always like to include some photos, why does the government do this? Why do we regulate this? What are some of these things in the field in action? So in this photograph, I'm standing on an old road bed. At the bottom of the photograph, about 8 feet underwater, is a clogged culvert. As you can see, it's backed up quite a large impoundment of water behind it. So safety, welfare, people, property. There's a sanitary sewer that used to run adjacent to this stream channel. So as far as protecting water quality, infrastructure, the sanitary sewer from the local authority is getting chronic inflows. They're having difficulty treating it, environmental issue. Also the maintenance of the infrastructure, it's under 8 to 10 feet of water, depending on where you are in the line. So in an emergency, they can't really get in there to maintain it. And probably most importantly, the road embankment is not designed as a dam, it's just a road embankment. So there are tens of thousands of cubic feet of water backed up behind this road with an unmaintained culvert. And if that road gave way, it could cause serious damage, health, safety, infrastructure, people downstream if that road embankment broke. This is in the northern portion of Allegheny County. This has since been fixed, by the way. It's a few years old. Just another example, purpose of regulations, why. This is a home somewhere on Gertie's Run. You can just see over time where this was built. The stream is essentially eroded up to the foundation. Think obviously the environmental purpose of the regulations. You see building debris, paint, parts of the foundation, bricks going right into the stream channel. And definitely from safety, property, infrastructure, this structure is very much in danger of being lost to a flood. Okay, a permit hierarchy. This is really a flow chart I developed thinking about what permits needed when, if any, under chapter 105. It's an extremely common question we get coming in the door. Go over this at pre-application meetings, but trying to distill for consultants, developers, contractors even, when do you need a permit under these regulations and which one to apply for, where to turn in that process. So here's the flow chart, calling the 105 permitting hierarchy. First question for any project boundary, limits of disturbance within a stream, 100-year floodway, wetlands, other body of water. If the answer is no, it's not a chapter 105 regulated project, no authorization, further coordination with conservation district, DEP is needed. If the answer is yes, the first place to turn are the waivers. There are 16 waiverable activities under chapter 105. It's the regulatory path of least resistance. So looking under 105.12, list all the different waivers. If your proposed project seems to meet one of those waivers, you should contact the regional office. Here it would be the Southwest Regional Office to get written acknowledgement of the waived activity. Conservation districts won't evaluate waived activities, whether or not they'd be covered. If the answer is no, the activity doesn't seem like it's covered by one of the waivers, the next step to look is at the chapter 105 general permits. Specifically, general permits 1 through 9. These are the permits we'll go over in a little more depth here shortly that are reviewed and issued at the county conservation district. If the county conservation district has a delegation with DEP. I think I'd add here, there's also general permits 10, 11, and 15. Those would be less onerous permitting paths than going through the joint permit approval. If it is one of the GPs 1 through 9, you could submit to Allegheny County Conservation District or whatever delegated 105 district you're working in. If the project cannot be covered by any of the general permits, and it similarly cannot be covered under any of the waivers, then you're looking at either one of the other general permits from DEP or a joint permit application or dam permit to DEP. So this is an easy desktop review lens to put on projects. Will we need chapter 105 permitting? And if so, what's the likely path that will be needed? Let's talk a little more about the chapter 105 general permits. So in the regulations, subchapter L 105.442, there's an authorization for general permits. So in accordance with the subchapter, the department may issue general permits if the department determines projects are similar in nature. The projects can be adequately regulated using standardized specifications and conditions. And the projects which are in the category and meet the specifications and conditions will comply with the requirements for permit issuance and the standards and requirements for design, construction, operation, maintenance, and monitoring. So all the general permits that somebody in the regulated public would be applying for, they are already issued permits. The department has issued these general permits under the authority of this subchapter. So they have standard sets of conditions, design specifications, requirements, and as a consultant or as a developer, you're really registering a project for use, saying what we are proposing meets all the standard specifications, conditions, requirements of this general permit. General permits 1 through 9 are reviewed by delegated county conservation districts. Just quickly, the 1 is fish habitat, 2 boats and launching ramps, 3 bank rehabilitation, protection, gravel bar removal. The GP4 is intake and outtake structures, outfall structures. 5 utility line crossings, 6 agricultural stream crossings, 7 GP7 minor road crossings, the GP8 temporary road crossings, and GP9 agricultural activities. Across the entire state, if you're working in a county that is 105 delegated, those are the 9 general permits that county conservation district will review under their delegation. There are 3 other general permits, the GP 10, 11, and 15. These would be reviewed by the regional DEP office. The GP 10 is for abandoned mine reclamation if you have obstructions or encroachments as part of AMD treatment systems. The GB 11 is for rehabilitation, replacement, modification of some existing encroachment or obstruction. And the GP 15, which I don't think statewide gets used very often, is for residential construction in wetlands. All of the pertinent forms, information are available on the DEP e-library. Do recommend anytime you're applying to go to the e-library and get the most up-to-date files. So all the source files, permitting forms, information for all the general permits are available there on e-library. For all the general permits, there's a standardized registration form. And there's a section D checklist requirements with all the pertinent attachments. It's the same across general permits and activities. Obviously, the attachments will change depending, but location map, PNDI, site-specific drawings, project description, wetland stream delineation. They're similar across all the general permits. It's the same registration form. Permit submission has become much more varied over the last 5 years. There are a combination of things that were already underway and the pandemic that has changed things. I think first and foremost, DEP since 2018 has launched e-permitting through Greenport, available electronically. Let's see if this will open. We've been registered since 2018. To this point, we've reviewed 5 general permits, 105, through the Greenport e-permitting system. For any developers, industry people, or consulting folks here, there is a landing page for 105 e-permitting. Currently, it just covers the general permits. But if you would like to register as a user or electronic filing administrator, there's a website that has plenty of resources here for how-tos, signing up, tutorials to make an account. Additionally, through our website, as a result of the pandemic and shifting to remote work, we've created a portal on our website using a simple jot form entry with a file upload that connects to a Google Drive folder where you can upload 105 general permits to our website. Not preferred, but we have had a few individuals require mailed hard copy to the Conservation District office. I put on base on here for DEP. It's not really for the general permits, but just other 105 permitting. Again, the Greenport e-permitting doesn't have complete functionality with all the permit types in chapter 105. So if you're submitting a joint permit, dam safety, something, you want to do it electronically, you can use on base for DEP. Next, I'm going to talk bulk of the presentation about some of the general permit limiting conditions. But before that, if this works, have a poll question for all the attendees. Go ahead and launch it here. First poll question, how many chapter 105 general permits are there? I'll just leave this up for about 10 or 15 seconds for everybody to answer, and I'll share out responses here in a moment. Okay, a couple more seconds. Okay, we got a variety of answers, but the majority did answer correctly. There are a total of 12 general permits under 105 right now issued by DEP. The GP 1 through 9 that the delegated conservation districts would review if they have the program, and the 10, 11, and 15. So a total of 12 chapter 105 general permits. Okay, general permit limiting conditions. So ACCD got the delegation in October of 2014. And in the last 8 years of the delegation, there's a pattern of limiting conditions, call them, that have emerged. So 82% of our withdrawn general permits since October 2014 are the GP3, bank rehabilitation, protection, and gravel bar removal, the GP5, utility line stream crossings, and the GP7, minor road crossings. So knowing this, wanted to communicate to save time, money for project permitting. It's good to understand the general permit conditions and want to share out some of the limiting conditions that we see. Just a brief disclaimer for this. Each of the general permits have numerous conditions. This is not exhaustive with all the conditions by general permit. Depending on general permit, it's 15 to 40, we'll say. These are just some of the conditions we see come up time and time again that prevent a project from being covered by one of these three, lead to a withdrawal, and then application of small projects permit or joint permit. So some of the GP7 limiting conditions. GP7 does not cover stream enclosures. So the minor road crossing permit. If you have a project that has more than 100 feet of a culvert, enclosure, putting in it in storm sewer, etc., it would not be covered under GP7. So an enclosure is defined in the regulations and in the general permit as 100 total feet. So if you have a project proposing that, it cannot be covered under GP7, even if the drainage area is 100 acres. Speaking of which, another condition we see come up time and time again. If you have a minor road crossing where the upstream watershed is greater than 1 square mile, it cannot be covered under the GP7. I know internally here at Allegheny, I think most of the conservation districts and the DEP regional offices, we're using USGS stream stats as a quick look at watershed area. You can get other watershed characteristics there. If you're proposing a minor road crossing where the stream channel and floodplain are delineated as floodway on a FEMA flood insurance rate map, it's condition 5I. GP7 is not applicable. So check FEMA firm panels before choosing this general permit. Condition 13S, the length of a culvert is only what is necessary for adequate road width and stable side slopes. So the GP7 authorizes a minor road crossing. We do occasionally get permits here in the door proposed under GP7 that are for piping a stream through a backyard to have additional yard space, or having a road access with some extended culvert to put either an entry sign or a shed at the entrance of a home or commercial place. The permit only covers the limited length of culvert needed for a road crossing and stable side slopes. Final limiting condition for GP7 to review. The depth of fill over culvert should not exceed minimum cover required by current manufacturer specification for the intended use. It's typically 1 to 3 feet, depending if it's a corrugated plastic pipe or concrete pipe, metal pipe. It also varies the fill from manufacturer by intended use. Is it strictly residential access or trail light access, or is it commercial? They're going to be dump trucks, heavier equipment crossing that. So just examples of things we see in permit review. We receive a general permit. We're reviewing the activity proposed against these conditions. So this is a permit we received recently in January of this year. Just a couple things, thinking about those conditions, specifically these ones. The stream enclosure, length of culvert, and the depth of fill over the culvert. So this proposal is 154.7 linear feet. So it's way over 100 feet considered an enclosure. Additionally, the amount of fill over it, when you see it varies from, 20, 25 feet of fill over this culvert. So this activity would not be covered by GP7. It can't be covered by a minor road crossing permit. It violates multiple conditions in the general permit 7. So this is a case where we would inform the applicant, their consultant of this, and it's withdrawn and they have to apply for small projects permit or other DEP 105 permit. Just an example, I always like bringing in these real world photographs, kind of trying to think through the conditions and what the makers of the permit conditions intended. So this is a very small stream. This is also in the northern part of Allegheny County, standing at the bottom of a big fill slope here. It's not a big stream and it's not a big culvert crossing. I think this thing was 12 inches. Over time, it becomes unmaintained. There's a lot of fill over it. It creates a lot of backwater if it's unmaintained. And specifically in this case, this was in a residential area. And during some heavier storms, when this backed up, it caught the grade going upstream and actually flooded a neighboring property in their garage. Just an example of these conditions and permitting paths, thinking about why some of these conditions are in place for the various general permits. GP3 limiting conditions. Projects that are involving channel relocation, realignment, placement of fill to construct berms and levees would not be covered under GP3. We do occasionally see, especially residential or small business commercial projects, in addition to a wall or riprap armoring a bank, they want to create some type of levee to prevent flow into their property, raising flood elevations on other properties, and that's not permitted under GP3. This permit also covers gravel bar removal, and removal of vegetated gravel bars is not covered under this permit. GP3 is one of the few general permits that require submission of photographs of the project area. The permit defines vegetated as 50% coverage. So if you have a gravel bar that is really well vegetated, above 50%, cannot remove it with a general permit 3. Other GP3 limiting conditions: slope protection, not placed in exterior steeper than 1.5 horizontal to 1 vertical. A lot of infrastructure next to streams in Allegheny County, specifically roads, sanitary sewer, other utilities. Sometimes you just run out of space because there's something right next to an eroding stream. So if you can't meet that slope for riprap, consider walls, gabions, another permit excavating top of bank. Channel deflectors are permissible under GP3, but they cannot extend into the channel greater than 25% the width of the channel. It often makes sense at the start of an eroded outside bank to put a deflector to try to redirect the foul wag towards the middle of the stream away from the eroding bank. Those can go up to 1/4 the width of the channel. The maximum height for walls is limited to 6 feet, measured from the top of the wall to the bottom of the stream. Ooh, I have stream bank here. That should be stream bed. Total is 6 feet, measured from the top of the wall to the bottom of the stream bed. So you can consider minimizing the height, reconsidering design, and maybe another 105 permits more applicable depending on site conditions. Just another 105 general permit submitted to our office that couldn't be covered. I apologize. Some of the text on the construction detail did not come through well. But the total height of the wall here from the stream bed to the top of the wall is 11 feet. GP3 has a condition for 6 total feet. And also, see on the existing parking lot in the far right, there's an additional 2 feet acting as a berm or levee to prevent the property from flooding, to put floodwaters on adjacent properties. And this activity would not be GP3 eligible. We would similarly withdraw this and point the applicant and their consultant to the region for a GP11 or joint permit. The general permit 5, utility line stream crossings, some of the limiting conditions we see. For utilities that are under stream beds, permit requires a minimum of 3 feet of cover over the utility, measured from the top of the utility to the bottom of the stream bed. If it's in bedrock, it's a total of 1 foot of cover. Thing with new utilities, generally easy to meet this condition, but a lot of times for sanitary sewer replacements or new laterals, the manholes are set, the pipes are at the elevation they're at, especially if there's been down cutting of that channel over time. It's just difficult to meet the grades sometimes with general permit 5 to ensure you have 3 feet of cover over top of the utility. And secondly, this one comes up but less frequently than 12B. Utility line crossings of streams should be accomplished so that the line is at a right angle to the stream bank. Again, for your new utilities, I think generally easy to meet, but depending on property rights and right of way, and for existing infrastructure tying in, sometimes we see proposals where the utility is almost running parallel up the middle of the stream bed, and that would not be covered under the GP5. See an example, thinking why these conditions are there. It's a gas line exposed in a stream channel. This is the eastern portion of Allegheny County. Obviously, being exposed like this without 3 feet of cover creates a property, infrastructure, utility danger if in flood conditions, debris, rocks, etc. break this. Obviously, public safety, welfare, gas, flammability if it did catch fire, and pollution for the stream if it broke. You have utility leaking whatever it's carrying into the stream channel. Some frequently asked questions, but before we do that, just going to test if everybody was paying attention with a few more poll questions. So for GP7, Chapter 105 regulations and the GP7 permit, what is the length of a stream enclosure? Just allow a few more moments here. Okay. Overwhelmingly, people got this correct. 100 feet is the definition of a stream enclosure in the GP7 permit conditions and in the 105 regulations. And again, if you have a minor road crossing that's going to be more than 100 feet in length, a culvert, it cannot be covered under the GP7. So an additional question on limiting conditions. What is the maximum height of a wall measured from stream bed to top of wall allowable under GP3? Just a few more seconds here. Okay, again, vast majority of people got the correct answer. The maximum allowable height for a wall under GP3 is 6 vertical feet measured from stream bed to the top of the wall. If you have a project that goes above that, you'd be looking at a joint permit or other application to the Southwest Regional Office or whatever regional office of DEP you're working in. Okay. And final question from the conditions. What is the minimum depth under the stream bed for a utility and bedrock? Minimum depth of cover for utility and bedrock? Just a few more moments. Okay. Ooh. So majority does have it by a hair. It is 1 foot of cover in bedrock. The 3 feet of cover would be required if it's a silt, cobble, gravel, stream bed bottom. But the GP5 condition, the utility would only need 1 foot of cover if it was in bedrock. Okay. Okay, just some frequently asked questions to round out the presentation for 105 that we see commonly. When do I have to submit an E&S plan with Chapter 105 general permits? General permit conditions and regulatory requirements in 105.13, that's the permit conditions, permit requirements under 105. They all reference having a reviewed and approved E&S plan. If you look at any of the general permits that I went over today, or any of the other general permits, again, I just highlighted a few of the limiting conditions we see. There is a condition in every one of those general permits, including GP11, for a reviewed and approved E&S plan. And in addition, again, to being in the general permit conditions itself, the permit package, it's in the regulations under 105.13. So how do I contact various groups? So the regional office DEP for 105 related questions, best bet calling 412-442-4000, the main number, and asking for who's in charge of phones for waterways, engineering, and wetlands that day. They're on a rotating basis for staff to have somebody in charge of incoming calls. You can contact DEP regional office for GP 11, 15, 10-2, joint permit applications, waiver requests, and emergency permit requests. Of course, if you're going through a permit review and you already know your reviewer, you have a direct contact there for email. But if you're reaching out with a general question cold to the region, that's the best path to take. District staff, we've all followed the same procedure. I always joke I don't have a red phone or anything that I just pick up and get Dana right away. Just calling the main number and asking to speak with who's in charge of phones for waterways and wetlands that day. Very recently, DEP has been instructing us and consultants applicants to call 412-442-4018 to schedule pre-application meetings for both the 102 and 105 program. Some other contacts that have crossover with 105, the Army Corps 404 requirements, Pittsburgh Regulatory Branch. If you have any projects within Ohio drainage, we reached out 412-395-7155. And the Fish and Boat Commission, their law enforcement office for the Southwest is out of Somerset, 814-445-8974. And their Division of Habitat Management out of Pleasant Gap. If you have a question on any of the details, fish habitat structures, conditions related to Fish and Boat Commission requirements, 814-359-5185. Really general question, one we often get from public, but what does DEP consider a stream? What are the 105 regulations? What's the definition of a stream? The definition of a stream in the 105 regulations is 2 words, a water course. Water course is further defined in the definitions as channel or conveyance of surface water, having defined bed and banks, whether natural or artificial, with perennial or intermittent flow. It's a really broad definition of what qualifies as a stream. Interestingly, in the regulatory definition, specifically says perennial or intermittent flow, so ephemeral streams are left out of the definition, but that is the regulatory definition of a stream. What's considered the 100-year floodway on a stream? DEP conservation districts will honor FEMA firm panels. If there's not a 100-year floodway delineated on a flood insurance rate map from FEMA, the rule by definition is 50 feet from top of bank in both directions, absent evidence to the contrary. We often see if they want to demonstrate especially for very small streams of high eroded banks, getting a peak flow just from stream stats, you'll have a peak 100-year discharge, and putting that through the cross-section dimensions of a channel and seeing what the 100-year flood level would be. Some cases we do see, depending on level of scrutiny, the applicant, a full-blown HEC-RAS study. At that point, we'd engage one of the engineering reviewers from the regional office. Conservation districts don't review past judgment on emergency permits. If you have a client or case where an emergency permit is wanted, contact the regional office. Once an emergency permit is approved, you do need to follow up with another 105 authorization for long-term operation and maintenance of whatever structure, whatever fix was done. This is always a hot button topic. Just describe exactly from the regulations what's said. So our waivers, automatic approvals, it's a nuanced question. All of the waivers listed under 105.12 have this blanket asterisk statement before they list all the waivers. It essentially says something otherwise appears like it could be covered under a waiver. DEP can still require a permit if there's a significant effect on safety, protection of life, health, property, or environment. Comes up a lot, at least in Allegheny County, but the waiver two says a water obstruction in a stream or floodway with a drainage area of 100 acres or less. Waiver does not apply to wetlands located in the floodway. So the waiver two says if you have an obstruction or encroachment in a very small headwater stream, less than 100 acres draining to it, there's a waiver from permit requirements. A couple of things built right into this definition as written. It does not cover encroachments. It specifically is saying obstructions. So culverts, utilities. So an encroachment, especially excavation, you can't dig and relocate a stream channel to drain somewhere else. It's not covered under this waiver. Also, it doesn't cover any wetlands that are in the floodway. If you have wetlands, they're still subject to 105 regulation and adjacent to small headwater streams. In my experience, if this is submitted for determination for review to the region, some of their common criteria they're looking at: what is the area of impact? Is it a footbridge, or is it a 300-foot enclosure burying a stream? What is the drainage area size? Is it 10 acres? Is it 99.9 acres, the point of impact? What's the stream value? You know, is this a very impacted warm water fishery, or is it a high quality or exceptional value surface water? Just generally speaking, if you do want written approval for a waiver, call the regional office when in doubt and submit for waiver determination early. The risk you could run, again, if work goes ahead, assuming, well, we're doing this under waiver two, again, with that asterisk statement, the DEP can always come back and require a permit for some activity that appears to be otherwise waived. So it's advisable early on in the process development to get a determination. When do general permits expire? All of the general permits, speaking more specifically here, 1 through 9 issued by conservation districts, require operation and maintenance. Especially, you know, you have a GP7, you have a minor road crossing, that applicant permittee is to keep that open and functioning, flowing. There are a few dates associated though. The GP8 authorization is good for 1 year from the acknowledgement date and can be renewed in writing for 1 year. Just to note, it is from the acknowledgement date, not the date the crossing's installed. It's directly from the permit language. So if you're authorized January 1st, but it doesn't get installed till June 1st, by January 1st, 1 year in writing, it should be removed or a request come in to the issuing agency for extension. The GP7 authorization requires construction of the crossing within 3 years. So once you receive GP3 authorization, so long as it's built within 3 years, it's good to go. If you get an issuance and then for whatever reason, the thing doesn't get constructed and in year 4, looking to build it, should reapply for permit coverage. Okay, we have some time for questions. See if some that have come in. Just a few housekeeping items before we take questions. Emails will be sent out to all attendees following this session. Emails are going to be sent to the email address that you registered with through InventBrite. The email is going to contain some resources I put together about what I spoke about today, a PDF of the presentation slides, a link to a survey and an acknowledgement of attendance detailing education credits. Please do take the survey. We summarize them, look at them each and every year. It's how we come up with content for the workshop and other education outreach events. So please do take some time to fill those out. This follow-up email is going to come from Allegheny County Conservation District, a company email address. So please check your junk folder if you don't receive this email by the end of the day. There are 2 additional webinars in the series this upcoming Thursday and last day of the month, Tuesday the 28th is the final webinar. Please do check out our website, registration information on those webinars and other education outreach events this spring. Okay, we have some time. We can take some questions here. So when constructing in an existing maintained right of way, what is your guidance between GP5 and GP11 for a pipeline replacement if the installation method is not a lift and lay? We've been through this with the Southwest Regional Office, different staff over the years. There are times, not only GP5 and 11, but other permits. I mean, the GP11 is maintenance, repair, replacement of an existing encroachment. There are times when more than one permit is applicable. We've seen it GP7 and GP11, GP3 versus GP11. My guidance would be more than one can be applicable. And so long as you're meeting all the other GP5 conditions, you can apply for and get coverage under the GP5. So we've been told several times by DEP that it's not necessary to contact DEP regarding waivers except for waiver 16. I believe you said something necessary to obtain a waiver approval. Did something change recently, or did I misunderstand your statement? Just to follow up with that, I thought that waivers are assumed and that if we meet the criteria of a waiver, no further coordination is necessary. Is that something that changed, or is contacting the regional DEP just a recommendation? Gosh, in a similar vein, where in the regulations does it require written approval for projects that are eligible for a waiver? Okay, so you are not required to get written approval for something that could be covered under a waiver. There's nowhere in the regulations where it says you must apply for waiver coverage in writing. It's a recommendation for your projects and for your clients. Again, with that blanket statement, if there's a big enough impact and DEP determines that there's enough impact on health, safety, property of people, or environmental impact, they can always require a 105 permit for something that is seemingly waived. So it's just a recommendation of good practice. If you intend to use a waiver, you know, you can always write the regional office if you want something in writing to cover your client down the road. I mean, practically speaking, you just have to use good professional judgment. I mean, the reality is that if they're putting a 2-inch gas line on a 12-acre drainage area stream, professional judgment, probably not as concerned about getting a waiver approval in writing. If it's commercial industrial park and they're burying 400 feet of a stream channel with an 80-acre drainage area at the bottom point. At that point, that type of giant impact, on the regulatory side, they're assessing, is this a substantial impact on the environment, health, safety of people? You might would be advisable to early on, get a waiver, get a determination. Are we going to be required to have a permit for this activity? Oh, interesting. For GP5, what is the amount of cover needed for utilities proposed under enclosed water courses? I don't think the general permit 5 makes any distinction between whether or not the stream is open or enclosed. Just check that live. I would still generally say 3 feet unless it's in bedrock, and it'd be 1. Yeah, there's no specific guidance in the condition on that question. Just says all utility lines under stream beds located such minimum of 3 feet cover between top of the utility or encasement, lowest contour of the stream bed, and then 1 foot for bedrock. There's not specific guidance, condition, provision on if that stream is culverted or in a cross pipe or something. Question, did the exposed gas line end up getting resolved? The answer is yes. That's why we were out there. People's Gas was applying for a GP5 to get this 3 feet under the stream bed. Question on GP5 and 11, when replacing a utility parallel to an existing utility, are there requirements within the permit conditions that require grouting or filling the existing line once the new line is in service? So the 105 regulations, obstructions and encroachments are what's regulated, and you can't abandon, construct, without a 105 permits. There are concerns about just abandoning a line in place. I know if during a GP5 review, it's something we get wind of, we'll typically ask that it's either cut and removed from stream bed in the 100-year floodway, or GP11's applied for if it's grouted in place, abandoned in place. Why do oil and gas general permit projects go straight to DEP? The Oil and Gas Bureau, they do have 105 permit reviewers. So for oil and gas activities, well pads, collection lines, etc., just the way the system and infrastructure is set up on regulatory side, they review any 105 permits associated with oil and gas. Do you need a separate GP11 to operate and maintain a structure that was approved under another GP? The answer is no. All the general permits, if you read through conditions, authorization, they require operation and maintenance. There are specific operation and maintenance notes and requirements and the conditions for GP3, GP5, GP7, etc. You do not need to apply for a GP11 with every other GP registration to cover operation and maintenance. This is an interesting question. This has come up a few other times. If you have a stream with a FEMA delineated 100-year floodplain that is 20 feet off the top of bank, but there is no FEMA delineated floodway, can you use the floodplain in lieu of the 50-foot floodway? We've interpreted the definition extremely literally. So in this case, there's not a mapped 100-year floodway from FEMA. Therefore, we revert to the 50-foot rule for what the 100-year floodway would be. There's not specific guidance or out saying, use the FEMA floodway. If a floodway is not mapped, then do this. The definition only says, in absence of a mapped 100-year floodway from FEMA, assume 50 feet, absent evidence to the contrary. Does the GP7 minor road crossing cover a replacement of an existing culvert, or does it automatically become a GP11? Kind of came up earlier. Sometimes there are cases where multiple general permits are applicable. So there are cases where GP7 could cover demolition and replacement of a bridge given all other conditions are met. Just specifically looking at the general permit 7. It does authorize, construction of bridges under meeting all these conditions, but also the removal. So you could be in a case where the GP7 a crossing meets all the other conditions and could be covered for the removal of an existing structure and then permitting a new structure. Question, what's the expiration for the general permits besides GP7 and 8? I can speak to the 1 through 9. There aren't other expiration timelines associated with the general permits. The 7 must be constructed within 3 years. The 8 is good for 1 year in writing. It can be extended a year. The other general permits, the 3, the 7, they require long-term operation and maintenance that doesn't expire so long as that obstruction or encroachment is in place. It's a question on permits for a utility that proposes to cross a stream overhead. There is a waiver, I think it's waiver 3 for overhead utility crossings. It wouldn't cover navigable waters. You would still need a permit in those cases. But if you're covering small headwater streams, there's no other infrastructure within the stream itself. So no monopoles, no roads that need to be constructed. There is a waiver for aerial lines. But if you do have minor road crossings, poles, fill, that type of thing, that would be a permitted activity. Okay, we're a couple minutes over 1 p.m. Thanks for all the good questions and not just softballs. We do have 2 more webinars in this series, this upcoming Thursday and then Tuesday the 28th. Please check our website to register and other future educational events. Thanks everybody for attending, and look for an email later on this afternoon. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.